Hello, welcome to another Burgundy with Tweedy video. It's a very warm Sunday afternoon. We're about a third of the way into June, almost halfway into June. Probably a bit too hot for tweed if I'm honest, but I had a strange hankering to wear this particular tweed. It doesn't get a lot of outings, doesn't feel appropriate for any day other than a Sunday for some strange reason. The heath is pretty packed. A lot of people flying kites today on top of Parliament Hill, but absolute swarms, really huge numbers of people. At least for now, the woods is comparatively quiet. People are probably put off by all the biting insects. I recently took delivery of a case of 6 from Berry Brothers and Rudd. I went through another trawl of their online catalogue to see what sort of comparative bargains were there to be found. The usual mixture, there's a few Gevrey Chambetans in there, a couple of other odds and ends, and this I think was the cheapest of the lot. I don't seem to have a very good head for numbers, do I? I don't seem to remember these prices, but I'll put that on screen because I'll need to look it up, and I can't be bothered to break my flow and get my phone out now to check. It's a Bourgogne Haute Cote de Nuits. The producer is Geantet Pansiot, which I don't think is one I've had before. The price was very attractive, and I am always on the lookout for Bourgogne Haute Cote de Nuits wines. I think that's a very interesting appellation. The one downside of this is that it's a 2020 vintage, and I've generally speaking been avoiding those recently because it's just not a year I particularly like. But the price was so good, naively perhaps hoping that the fact it's from the Haute Cote de Nuits, the high bit of the Cote de Nuits, means that it's a little bit cooler, and in that very hot year of 2020 when a lot of the fruit went sort of dark and jammy, perhaps magically the Haute Cote de Nuits escaped that. I don't think it says on the bottle which particular part of that appellation it is from. It's quite big, Haute Cote de Nuits, very spread out, not completely covered in vineyards like, for example, Gevrey Chambertin is. Every conceivable inch of flat ground that doesn't have a house on it or a road on it, covered in vines for places like Gevrey Chambertin. But you get to the Haute Cote de Nuits and it's a lot more patchy on the map. I think a combination of the fact that it's just not as valuable land and perhaps less of it is suitable for viticulture. That was a lot of blurb, wasn't it? I'm sorry, I will shut up now and hasten the opening of this bottle, which may well be a disappointment, but at the moment I'm very appreciative of the fact that I'm somehow magically on the heath, which is elsewhere completely overrun with people, and yet here in the woods, as I say, relatively quiet. First impression of that, well, yeah, it is a little bit on the dark side, isn't it? And relatively dense in colour. I don't know how to, opaque is the word I'm looking for there, isn't it? See what this is like before the first swirl. It's not a bad initial nose. I would be lying if I were to say I'm not slightly thinking of preserves, the J word, jam. But it's also kind of pretty. There is, on the nose, I know this always sounds weird, but there is a suggestion of something that's going to be relatively sweet, but a nice fruit character of blackberries, perhaps mûr. There might be a bit of black currant in there, but a fairly sort of big, thick, rich version of black currant. Possibly other berry fruits, red and black berry fruits. I think the first and foremost fruit character I'm getting there is probably blackberry. Give that a swirl, see what changes. Pretty much more of the same actually, which is not a complaint. It was nice to begin with without the need for a swirl. Touch of something woody emerging there now. The stems from those bramble bushes, perhaps the blackberry bushes. We are definitely talking about dark fruit here, and there is a slight suggestion of jamminess, at least from the nose. But it is somehow managing to also still be quite pleasant, at least in terms of the nose there. Not bad on the first sip. I quite like the beginning of the mouthfeel. There is certain smoothness to that, a richness, I suppose, to the fruit as well, which I like. Definitely some acidity there. But then quite a hot tannic sensation takes over after that. Surprisingly tannic, well, possibly spice. I don't know, somewhere between tannin and spice. I sometimes get the two confused, don't I? Yeah, so fruit-wise, I think we're still talking about blackberries, dark berry fruit, possibly a little bit of red berry fruit in the mix there. But quite an interesting dimension of, I think, spice, actually. I think that is okay. It clearly has been at least a partial victim of that standard problem of 2020 Burgundies, dark fruit, bit jammy. But I think, as I predicted / hoped, the fact that it is at that higher elevation, is it something like 400 metres, really quite high up the top of the hills that make up that appellation, the Hautes de Nuits. I think that has saved it from really going over the edge. There is a hint of jam to this, but I wouldn't write it off as being unbearably so. And perhaps these 2020 wines are getting on a bit now. They're coming up to 5 years old. Quite often rich sugary notes will tend to sort of gradually soften. I think jammy notes can get better with age, as long as there is some underlying acidity to keep it going. And I think this has a bit of acidity to keep it going. And I think that spice note, is it tannin, is it spice, it's some sort of wood influence, keeps the whole thing interesting as well. That stops the jam from being overwhelming. A strange mental image, being overwhelmed with jam. I think that's all right, drinkable. Not world-shatteringly amazing, but at the price point it was, that I've forgotten, but I think it was cheap. I wouldn't have expected it to be either, but quite reasonably drinkable. Will do me nicely for hiding in the woods from the crowds on Hampstead Heath of a Sunday afternoon. Cheers.